And welcome back to my channel. I appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos. And just a little reminder again, these videos are not a replacement for professional therapy, but more or less just some resources for anyone who might be struggling with whatever we're talking about. So today we're talking about postpartum depression. And just a note about that, sometimes it's not just depression. There can be anxiety, there can even be psychosis in extreme situations. And the more you know, the better equipped you are to deal with these things. Sometimes these labels can feel really, really scary. They can feel really intense and out of our control. But the way to receive a feeling of control is just to get more educated about this stuff. In our culture, in South Asian culture, it's not an open conversation often. Mother's mental health isn't really high up there on the priority list when it comes to a brand new life coming into the family dynamic. Naturally so, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of expectations for everyone all around, but the main thing to remember is that the baby will do as well as the mother is doing. So just talking about some common themes in the South Asian culture and what women may experience. Sometimes there's this huge difference between expectations and reality. Nothing can quite prepare you for those first few weeks of motherhood. You can read all the books, watch all the videos, but it's one of those things that you just have to go through in order to learn the ropes. And a part of that process can be some growing pains. Not only are you physically healing, but you're also kind of being reborn in a real psychological, emotional, and spiritual sense. So just kind of noting, what are your expectations going into the journey of parenthood? And are they maybe causing you to set the bar too high? Is it setting yourself up for failure to say, well, I'm going to exclusively breastfeed and that's it? Sometimes we just really want to do our absolute best because that's how we've got this far as second gen South Asian Canadians or wherever you may be. You know, we are high achievers, we're people pleasers, we try to be the best of the best at everything we do. So that perfectionism when it comes to motherhood, it can actually be more harmful than helpful. So let's dive a little deeper into that. So with people pleasing, that can get a little difficult when what maybe the family system wants and expects is at odds with what you inherently know is best for your baby. So when it comes to that conflict, it can be really activating for a South Asian woman for the first time to now have to say no when she's used to always saying yes for the benefit of the greater group, and have to suddenly enforce boundaries and learn how to do that. And it can be necessary, but it can also be really challenging to have to enforce boundaries. It can feel really activating. It can give anxiety and cause all sorts of disruption. So just being mindful and prepared of that, and maybe having a few conversations within the home beforehand and with extended family in terms of expectations, what's realistic, what's necessary in terms of feeding schedules, nap schedules, all that kind of stuff. You know, even the concept of motherhood has more or less, or parenthood has changed throughout the generations. Now, becoming a parent is a lot more of a conscious decision than maybe it was previously. Previously, it was just the status quo. You follow a very cookie cutter order of life. You know, we're talking about the parents' generation here. Maybe they would get married to the partner of their family's choosing, and then within the next year or so, they'd have a baby. And it was just not even of do I want to do this, but of course I'm going to do this. This is just what everyone does. So naturally, so now when we're in a generation with all this choice and we are more focused on our own inner fulfillment and happiness, and we have all these dreams and ideas of what living that out should look like, well, sometimes it can be a little bit different than what maybe our parents' generation is used to. one thing to know is that even if we go into it with these really amazing expectations and ideas, sometimes just due to how challenging those first few weeks can be, it's hard to live up to that. So we're almost setting ourselves up for failure when it comes to that ideal idea of, I am going to be this kind of parent. If there's anything your baby will teach you within the first few weeks, those really tender, delicate first few weeks, it's that you cannot be set in stone and you have to be flexible in your ideas about parenthood. Every baby's so different. Every baby's needs and wants are so different. So learning how to be adaptable is another protective factor here. Rigidity in your ideas of what it's supposed to be like, that's usually what ends up triggering some of those feelings. Another thing to note is that this is a simple chemical imbalance that can sometimes happen even if you have all the protective factors in place. So just being aware that even the most well-informed individuals, myself included, can fall into the loop of experiencing those baby blues, and sometimes worse, right? There's a potential for extreme cases of anxiety, sometimes even psychosis in really extreme cases. And the more you know, this is not to induce fear, but the more you know, the better prepared you can be to seek out extra resources should it be necessary to do so. Another theme to pay attention to is, have we more or less healed? It's impossible to be fully healed, but have we more or less healed some of our own childhood wounds so that we're not bringing them into the equation when we're becoming parents? Sometimes we have this idea of, I'm going to right all the wrongs through this precious baby, and what we end up doing is putting way too much pressure on ourselves. And it gets really hard to live up to that idea, that supposed to mentality. So just kind of catching the perfectionism and saying, is this a realistic goal for myself? Or do I maybe need to learn how to be a little bit more flexible and adaptable when it comes to just rolling with the punches? Every day is a new adventure when it comes to early motherhood. Another theme to note is sometimes it can hit you like a ton of bricks, and no matter if you're perfectly fine in the pregnancy period, something can just happen and you can feel very underprepared for everything that early motherhood and parenthood entails. And this goes not just for mom, but also dad too. There can be this sense of grief and loss for your old life, I say that because it's not that suddenly that all goes away and now you're just this parenting machine, maybe for the first year. But eventually you do come back to yourself. So that sense of grief and loss, just remembering that you will return to the things that make you you, and you won't just be this secondary life force for another being. You'll come home to yourself. Another thing to kind of talk about and think about is the concept of how strong is your marital union. And sometimes becoming a parent can really trigger and highlight some of the things that might not have been working within your marriage. So really, even, it can be a good idea there's premarital counseling. We'll go into preparental counseling and agree upon what parenting style, what type of agreement do you want to have when it comes to visitors and things like that, just so you're both on the same page and there's not extra fluff going on when there's enough things to be stressed and worried about during those first little while. It can be excellent to have a buddy system. So if you have someone trustworthy in your life, just let them know, like, hey, I'm learning about postpartum depression and anxiety. I'm hoping that it does not impact me, but if it does, these are the things to look out for. So anything like negative intrusive thoughts, feeling like you're not healing, feeling like you're worrying a whole lot more than maybe is normal for your personality type. having catastrophizing thoughts, feeling like there's going to be worst case scenarios. So just appointing someone close to you in your life, and it doesn't have to be your partner per se, because maybe they're going through the exact same thing, but perhaps a cousin, a close friend, something like that, who can just kind of regularly check in with you and be like, hey, how are you doing with your mantras? Are you keeping up with them? It can be a really good thing to set the intention to just have daily affirmations and mantras when you wake up in the morning, and just kind of remind yourself, this too shall pass. My right now is not my forever, and something is better than nothing, right? We kind of commit to this idea of being super moms because we want to be better than what we had experienced. But at the same time, sometimes that can actually be more harmful than helpful. So just kind of recognizing if that excessive worrying or trying to do it all and be it all might be taking over a little bit. Lastly, sometimes, we do all the right things and we reach out for help, but we're not met with adequate support. So I can recall after I had my daughter, I reached out to someone close in my life and I said, hey, something ain't right. I at that time, I was not a mental health care practitioner, but I recall saying, sometimes I feel like I'm really having these weird, dark thoughts and I don't want to be having them, but I just can't stop them. And because that person was not well versed in the field of psychology or mother's mental health, maybe they weren't able to help me as well as someone who was familiar with these things. So keep going and reaching out for support until you finally have someone who's able to grab your hand back. And that's not to chastise or negatively put down anyone who doesn't, but sometimes it's just a matter of not knowing. People can only help you as much as they know. So just recognizing, talk to your family doctor, reach out to the nurses line, keep going, talk to fellow moms, and reach out for that support, because there's nothing worse than feeling like you're the only one who's experiencing these thoughts and feelings. It can also be really great idea to already join a mom's group or a mindfulness group or something of that support right before you become a mom, just so those practices are already there and it's just second nature and habitual to you to be a little bit mindful through those first few weeks of chaos. All in all, I really hope you found this video informative and helpful. Please, if you're struggling or you know someone who's struggling, please reach out for help. You don't have to suffer alone. And just remember, this too shall pass. Take care. God bless everyone.